The wrench slipped from Sam Rodriguez's greasy fingers for the third time that evening. She cursed quietly and wiped her hands on her coveralls, leaving fresh stains on fabric that had seen better days 5 years ago. The old cargo hauler she was fixing groaned and settled on its landing struts, making the whole garage shake. Outside, thunder rolled across Haven's Edge colony, and the first drops of acid rain began tapping against the metal roof. Sam crawled back under the hauler's belly, squinting at the twisted coolant line that had been giving her trouble all week. The ship belonged to old Pete Watson, who ran supplies between the mining stations in the outer system. Pete was good people, the kind who paid fair wages and didn't ask too many questions about where a mechanic learned to fix alien tech without formal training. The coolant line was cracked where it connected to the quantum drive housing, probably from all the rough landings Pete made on the mining asteroids. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming harder against the roof. Sam paused in her work, listening to the sound. Acid rain had been falling more often lately, maybe twice a week now instead of the monthly storms they used to get. The colony administrator said it was just weather patterns shifting, nothing to worry about. But Sam had noticed things. The rain always seemed to come after the big cargo ships left for the orbital stations, and it was getting stronger each time. She reached for her plasma cutter to seal the coolant line when the lights in her garage flickered. The power grid on Haven's Edge was old and temperamental, especially during storms. Sam had rigged up her own backup generator years ago, built from spare parts and sheer stubbornness. It kicked in automatically, humming to life in the corner of the shop. The sound of crying cut through the noise of rain and machinery. Sam froze, the plasma cutter halfway to the coolant line. The crying came again, high and desperate like a child in pain, but it was coming from outside where the acid rain was falling. No human would be out there without full protective gear. The rain could burn through skin in minutes. She slid out from under the hauler and walked to the small window near her workbench. The glass was thick and stained, designed to keep out the worst of the colony's harsh environment. Sam wiped away condensation and peered into the storm. The rain fell in sheets, glowing faintly green where it hit the ground and pooled in the street. The crying sound came again, clearer now. Something was moving near the wall of her garage. Something small and hurt. Sam grabbed her rain gear from the hook by the door. The heavy coat and boots were designed for brief exposure to the acid storms, but they wouldn't protect her for long. She pulled on the thick gloves and sealed the helmet, checking the air filter. The crying outside grew weaker, more desperate. The airlock to her garage was just big enough for one person. Sam cycled through quickly, feeling the familiar hiss of the decontamination spray. Then she was outside in the storm, acid rain drumming against her helmet and running in green streams down her visor. The creature huddled against the concrete wall of her garage was like nothing Sam had ever seen. It was small, maybe the size of a house cat, but shaped like the dragons from old Earth stories her grandmother used to tell. Its body was covered in scales that looked like they were made of crystal or glass, and they glowed with a soft inner light. The creature's wings were folded tight against its body, and its long neck was curled protectively around itself. Where the acid rain touched the creature's scales, they hissed and smoked. Dark patches spread across its crystalline hide, and its glow was fading. The dragon's eyes were large and prismatic, splitting the garage's light into rainbow patterns even as tears ran down its narrow face. When it saw Sam, the creature lifted its head. One tiny claw extended toward her, trembling with effort. The crying stopped, replaced by sounds that Sam somehow understood despite their alien nature. The dragon was pleading with her. Begging for help, Sam didn't hesitate. She scooped the creature up in her armored hands, feeling how light it was, how fragile. The dragon didn't struggle, just pressed itself against her gloves as if it knew she was trying to help. Sam turned and ran for the airlock, rain streaming off her gear. The decontamination cycle felt like forever. Sam watched through her helmet as the creature's glow continued to fade. The acid had burned patches all across its hide, leaving dark marks that looked painful. But the dragon's eyes stayed fixed on Sam's face, trust and hope shining in their prismatic depths. Inside her garage, Sam quickly stripped off her rain gear and carried the dragon to her workbench. She had medical supplies for treating chemical burns from her early days learning to work with alien tech. The dragon lay still in her hands, breathing fast and shallow, its glow now just a flicker. Sam had neutralizing gel for acid burns designed for human skin, but it might work. She squeezed a small amount onto her finger and gently touched one of the burned spots on the dragon's side. The creature flinched but didn't pull away. The gel hissed softly as it neutralized the acid, and the dark burn mark began to fade. The dragon made a sound that might have been relief or gratitude. Sam worked carefully, treating each burn while the creature watched her with those amazing eyes. As she worked, she began to notice things. The dragon's scales weren't just crystal. They had patterns inside them that looked almost like circuit boards, and when her diagnostic scanner beeped nearby, the creature's eyes flickered in response as if it was reading the electronic signals. This wasn't just some alien animal. This was something far more complex. When Sam finished treating the burns, the dragon's glow returned stronger than before. It sat up in her palm and looked directly at her, then made a series of soft sounds that somehow conveyed deep gratitude. Sam felt tears in her own eyes as she realized she was looking at a thinking, feeling being who had been in terrible pain. The dragon extended one claw toward Sam's grease-stained fingers, touching them gently as if blessing them. Outside, the acid rain continued to fall, but inside the garage, something important had just begun. 3 days had passed since Sam found the dragon in the acid rain. She had set up a small bed for the creature using clean shop rags and a heating element from an old environmental suit. The dragon seemed comfortable enough, spending most of its time perched on Sam's workbench, watching her repair various pieces of equipment with those strange, intelligent eyes. Sam had started calling the creature Prism because of the way its scales split light into rainbow patterns. Prism seemed to like the name, or at least responded when Sam used it. The dragon was remarkably well behaved, never getting in the way of Sam's work, but always staying close enough to observe what she was doing. The strange thing was how Prism reacted to her electronic equipment. Every time Sam fired up a diagnostic scanner or used her plasma welder, the dragon's scales would pulse with light in rhythm with the machines. When she worked on anything with a quantum processor, Prism would become very still and focused, as if listening to something Sam couldn't hear. Sam was replacing power couplings on a mining drone when the garage door alarm chimed. She looked up to see 2 colonial security officers standing outside, their faces grim behind their helmets. Sam recognized Lieutenant Brooks, a decent man who usually left her alone as long as she paid her taxes and didn't cause trouble. The other officer was new, younger, with the eager look of someone trying to prove himself. Sam activated the intercom. "Evening, Lieutenant. What can I do for you?" Brooks stepped closer to the speaker. "Sam, we're looking for something that might have come your way. There was a theft from one of the research facilities 3 nights ago. Valuable xenological specimens went missing during transport." Sam's hand moved casually to cover Prism, who had gone very still on the workbench. The dragon seemed to understand the danger and pressed itself flat against the metal surface. "What kind of specimens?" Sam asked, keeping her voice steady. The younger officer spoke up. "Classified alien biotechnology. Small, probably injured. Could be dangerous if handled improperly. Have you seen anything unusual?" Sam shook her head. "Nothing but the usual broken equipment and drunk miners. You know how it is down here in the workshop district?" Brooks studied her through the reinforced glass of the garage door. "Mind if we take a look around?" "Just to be thorough." "Sorry, Lieutenant, but I've got sensitive equipment running diagnostics right now. The electromagnetic interference from your gear could damage some very expensive components. Maybe you could come back tomorrow." The younger officer started to protest, but Brooks held up a hand. "That's fine, Sam. But if you do see anything strange, give us a call immediately. This thing could be carrying diseases or worse." "Of course, Lieutenant. Always happy to help Colonial Security." The officers left, but Sam noticed they lingered across the street for a while before moving on. She waited a full hour before speaking to Prism again. "They were looking for you, weren't they?" she said quietly. Prism lifted its head and made a series of soft sounds that somehow conveyed sadness and fear. The dragon hopped down from the workbench and walked over to Sam's computer terminal. It placed one tiny claw on the keyboard and looked at Sam expectantly. "You want to use the computer?" Prism nodded, a very human gesture that looked strange coming from the dragon-like creature. Sam activated the terminal and stepped back. Prism began touching keys with careful precision, its claws moving across the keyboard with surprising speed. Simple drawings appeared on the screen. First, a picture of Prism surrounded by others like it, all glowing brightly. Then a larger shape that might have been a ship or station, with the small dragons being carried inside. The next image showed the dragons connected to complex machinery, their glow much dimmer. Sam felt her stomach tighten as she understood what Prism was showing her. They took you from your family, put you in machines. More drawings appeared. The dragons connected to the machines seemed to be powering them, their life force being drained to run complex systems. Then came an image of Prism breaking free during what looked like a transport accident, fleeing into the night. The final drawing was the most disturbing. It showed many more dragons still trapped in the machines, their glow almost gone. Numbers appeared next to the image. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Your people are still trapped, Sam whispered. Prism's eyes filled with tears as it nodded again. The dragon touched the screen where the trapped dragons were shown, making soft crying sounds. Sam sat down heavily in her work chair. She had always suspected that the big corporations were up to something shady in the outer system. But this was worse than she had imagined. Using sentient beings as living components in their machines was slavery of the worst kind. The research facility they mentioned, Sam said slowly. That's where you escaped from? Prism shook its head and pointed upward toward the ceiling and the space beyond. It quickly drew another picture showing an orbital station far above the planet. They're keeping your people up there, in space. Prism nodded sadly, then did something that surprised Sam. The dragon walked over to her diagnostic scanner and placed both front claws on the device. Immediately, the scanner began displaying readings unlike anything Sam had ever seen. Complex quantum signatures flowed across the screen, and the machine's processing speed increased dramatically. You can interface with our technology, Sam breathed. You're not just intelligent, you're like living computers. Prism removed its claws from the scanner and the readings returned to normal. The dragon looked at Sam with an expression that seemed almost proud, as if it was showing off a special talent. Sam began to understand the full scope of what the corporations were doing. These dragons weren't just slaves, they were the key to faster-than-light communication and quantum processing. Every advanced system in the colony probably depended on the suffering of creatures like Prism. We have to help them, Sam said, surprising herself with the determination in her voice. We have to get your people free. Prism's scales blazed with sudden hope, and the dragon made happy chirping sounds. It hopped back to the computer and began drawing again, this time showing crude schematics of ships and technical systems. Sam leaned forward, studying the drawings. Her years of fixing equipment had taught her to read alien schematics, even crude ones drawn by a grateful dragon. Prism was showing her the layout of the orbital station, the security systems, the location where the other dragons were being held. You're asking a lot, Sam said quietly. I'm just a mechanic. I fix things that are broken. I don't break into high-security facilities. Prism looked at her with those prismatic eyes, and Sam saw something in them that made her heart ache. The dragon wasn't just asking for help. It was placing complete trust in her grease-stained hands and mechanical skills. Somehow, the small creature believed that a frontier mechanic could accomplish what trained soldiers and corporate agents couldn't. Maybe it was right. Sam had always been good at fixing things that others said couldn't be repaired, at finding solutions where others saw only problems. And looking at Prism's hopeful face, she realized she was going to try. Sam spent the next week learning everything she could about Prism and the situation in the outer system. Working together in the evenings after her regular repair jobs, they developed a crude but effective communication system. Prism could manipulate Sam's computer with remarkable skill, creating detailed drawings and even accessing some of the colony's public data networks. What they discovered made Sam's blood run cold. The acid rain wasn't environmental damage at all. It was a byproduct of the quantum extraction process happening on the orbital station. Every time the corporations harvested energy from the captive dragons, the waste products were dumped into the planet's atmosphere. The rain was literally the tears and suffering of Prism's people, falling on the colony below. Prism showed Sam corporate shipping manifests that it somehow accessed from the colony's data systems. Dozens of xenological specimens had been transported to the orbital facility over the past 2 years. The manifests listed them as biological quantum processors and living computational matrices. The cold, clinical language made Sam sick. But the worst discovery came when Prism accessed the colony's power grid data. Every piece of advanced technology on Haven's Edge was connected to quantum processing systems that ran on power beamed down from the orbital station. The faster-than-light communicators, the weather control systems, even the medical equipment in the colony hospital. All of it was powered by the enslaved dragons. Sam realized with growing horror that she had been complicit in this system her entire time on Haven's Edge. Every repair she had made, every system she had fixed had been part of a network built on slavery and suffering. Her own diagnostic equipment, her quantum welders, even the backup generator in her garage, all of it connected to the orbital station and the trapped dragons. "How many of them are up there?" Sam asked one evening as she watched Prism work at the computer. The dragon paused in its typing and turned to look at Sam with sad eyes. It held up its tiny claws trying to indicate a number, but quickly gave up and returned to the keyboard. Numbers appeared on the screen, 347 dragons ranging in age from hatchlings to adults. Sam felt tears in her eyes. 347 thinking, feeling beings trapped in machines and used as living batteries. How long have they been imprisoned? More numbers appeared, some for months, others for years. The longest had been captive for 4 years, their life force slowly being drained to power the colony's systems. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk above the garage, listening to Prism breathing softly on its makeshift bed below. The dragon had taken to sleeping near Sam's workbench as if guarding her tools. Sometimes Sam would hear it crying softly in its sleep, probably dreaming of its captured family. The next morning brought an unwelcome visitor. Director Walsh from the Colonial Administration stood outside Sam's garage, flanked by corporate security guards in expensive armor. Walsh was a thin, nervous man who had always struck Sam as the type who would sell his own mother if the price was right. "Miss Rodriguez," Walsh said through the intercom, "I understand you've been asking questions about our orbital facilities." Sam kept her voice steady as she activated the speaker. "Just trying to understand where my power comes from, Director. Professional curiosity. I'm afraid that information is classified for security reasons. I'm here to remind you that your repair license depends on staying within approved parameters. Asking too many questions about corporate operations could be seen as problematic." The threat was clear enough. Sam glanced at her workbench where Prism was hiding under a tarp, perfectly still and silent. "Understood, Director. I'll stick to fixing engines and keeping my mouth shut." Walsh smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. Oh, and Miss Rodriguez, if you happen to encounter any unusual biological specimens, the reward for reporting them has been increased to 50,000 credits. Enough to buy a new workshop on a better world." After they left, Sam pulled the tarp off Prism. The dragon looked shaken, its scales dim with fear. It quickly went to the computer and began typing frantically. "They're increasing security," Sam read from the screen. "More guards on the station. They know you escaped and they're getting desperate to find you." Prism's typing became more urgent. Words appeared explaining that the extraction process was accelerating. The dragons were being drained faster than before, their life force converted to energy at an unsustainable rate. Many of them were dying from the strain. "How long do they have?" Sam asked. The answer made her stomach drop. "Weeks, maybe less." Prism continued typing, explaining that the corporations had received a massive order for quantum processing power from somewhere deep in the galaxy. They were pushing the dragons beyond their limits to fulfill the contract, sacrificing the captives for short-term profits. Sam sat down heavily in her work chair. The scope of the problem seemed impossible. She was just one person with a small garage and basic tools, facing a massive corporate conspiracy with unlimited resources and legal immunity. How could she possibly rescue hundreds of dragons from a high-security orbital station? But then she looked at Prism, who had stopped typing and was watching her with those prismatic eyes. The dragon's trust in her was absolute, its faith in her abilities unshakable. Prism believed that Sam's grease-stained hands could accomplish miracles. Maybe they could. Sam had always been good at finding unconventional solutions to impossible problems. Her repair work had taught her that every system, no matter how complex, had weaknesses that could be exploited. And she had one advantage that the corporations didn't expect. She understood both human and alien technology, and she had a partner who could interface with both. "Show me everything," Sam said firmly. "Every detail about the station, the security systems, the extraction process. If we're going to do this, we need to understand exactly what we're up against." Prism's scales blazed with renewed hope as it turned back to the computer. For the next several hours they worked together, with the dragon accessing increasingly classified information through methods Sam didn't entirely understand. Corporate security protocols, Station layouts, guard rotations, even the technical specifications of the quantum extraction equipment. As the picture became clearer, Sam began to see possibilities. The station's security was designed to keep people out and dragons in, but it wasn't prepared for someone who understood both systems working together. The extraction equipment was sophisticated but fragile, dependent on precise quantum resonance frequencies that could be disrupted with the right interference. Most importantly, the dragons themselves were the key to their own liberation. If they could coordinate their quantum abilities, they could overload the extraction systems from within. But they would need help from the outside, someone who could get into the station and show them how to break free. Sam looked at her grease-stained hands, the same hands that had saved Prism from the acid rain. Maybe those hands could save 346 more dragons. It was time to start planning a rescue that everyone would say was impossible. Sam stared at the pile of salvaged parts scattered across her garage floor and wondered if she had finally lost her mind. Broken drive components, burnt-out quantum processors, hull plating from decommissioned cargo ships, and dozens of other pieces that most people would consider junk. To Sam, they looked like the beginnings of a miracle. "You really think we can build a stealth shuttle from this?" she asked Prism, who was perched on her workbench, studying the technical specifications they had stolen from the corporate databases. The dragon looked up from the computer screen and nodded confidently. It began typing rapidly, showing Sam how its people's quantum abilities could interface with human technology in ways that the original designers never intended. The hybrid systems they could create together would be unlike anything that existed in known space. Over the past 2 weeks, Sam had been quietly acquiring parts from scrap dealers and salvage yards across the colony. She paid with credits earned from her legitimate repair work, careful not to buy too much from any one source. To outside observers, it looked like she was just building up her inventory of spare parts. The truth was far more ambitious. Sam was attempting to construct a spacecraft capable of reaching the orbital station undetected, infiltrating its security systems, and evacuating hundreds of dragons. The fact that she had never built a complete ship before seemed like a minor detail compared to everything else that could go wrong. Prism hopped down from the workbench and walked over to the largest component. Sam had acquired the quantum drive core from a crashed mining ship. The core was damaged, its quantum containment field generators burnt out, and its navigation systems fried. Most mechanics would have sold it for scrap metal. The dragon placed its front claws on the core's surface and immediately began to glow. The dead metal responded, humming to life as Prism's quantum abilities flowed through the damaged circuits. Burnt components began to heal themselves, and the core's energy output stabilized at levels Sam had never seen before. Incredible, Sam breathed, watching her instruments register impossible readings. You're not just interfacing with it, you're actually repairing it at the quantum level. Prism removed its claws and the core continued to function, its output steady and clean. The dragon turned to Sam with an expression that seemed almost smug, as if it was showing off. They worked together through the night, Sam providing the mechanical expertise while Prism handled the quantum engineering. The dragon could manipulate matter at the subatomic level, creating connections between components that shouldn't have been compatible. Human plasma welders merged seamlessly with alien crystal matrices, creating hybrid systems that operated according to entirely new principles. By morning, they had assembled the basic framework of a small spacecraft. It looked like nothing Sam had ever seen, part human engineering and part alien artistry. The hull was a patchwork of different materials bonded together by Prism's quantum abilities, creating a surface that seemed to shift and flow in the light. The stealth systems were the most impressive part. Prism had somehow integrated its own natural light-bending abilities into the ship's hull, creating an active camouflage system that could make the entire vessel nearly invisible. The dragon demonstrated by placing its claws on the hull and causing the entire framework to fade from view, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air. "Even corporate sensors won't be able to track us," Sam said admiringly. "But can you maintain that effect while we're in space?" Prism nodded and returned to the computer, typing out explanations of how its people's quantum abilities worked. The dragons were naturally adapted to manipulating electromagnetic radiation and quantum fields. In space, surrounded by the quantum foam of vacuum, their abilities were actually enhanced rather than diminished. The next challenge was life support. The ship needed to sustain both Sam and potentially hundreds of rescued dragons during the return trip to Haven's Edge. Sam had salvaged atmospheric processors from several different vessels, but none of them were designed to handle the exotic atmospheric requirements that Prism's people needed. Again, the Dragon provided an elegant solution. It showed Sam how to modify the processors to create what it called quantum air, an exotic matter state that could support both human and dragon physiology simultaneously. The process required precise control of molecular structure, something that was impossible with purely human technology, but became simple when combined with Prism's abilities. As they worked, Sam began to understand just how remarkable her partner was. Prism wasn't just intelligent, it was creative in ways that Sam had never encountered. The Dragon would look at a technical problem and immediately see solutions that violated everything Sam thought she knew about physics and engineering. Yet somehow those impossible solutions worked perfectly. "Your people," Sam said during a break. "They're not just living computers, are they? You're artists, engineers, creators." Prism's scales brightened with pride as it nodded. The Dragon returned to the computer and began showing Sam images of its homeworld, a place where crystal cities grew like living things and technology was indistinguishable from biology. The dragons built their civilization by singing matter into new forms, their quantum abilities allowing them to reshape reality through pure thought and will. The corporations had seen this incredible creative power and decided to enslave it, forcing the dragons to use their gifts to power mundane human machines. It was like capturing angels and forcing them to generate electricity. Sam felt her anger growing as she worked. The rescue mission was no longer just about freeing prisoners. It was about preserving an entire civilization that the corporations were slowly murdering for profit. Every dragon that died in the extraction chambers was a unique artist and engineer, whose loss diminished the universe itself. By the end of the week, their impossible ship was nearly complete. It was small, barely large enough for Sam and a few dozen rescued dragons, which meant they would need to make multiple trips to evacuate everyone. The ship's quantum drive could make the journey to the orbital station in a few hours, much faster than conventional vessels. The most dangerous part would be getting inside the station. Prism had provided detailed schematics, but the security systems were formidable. Automated weapons, energy barriers, and teams of corporate guards protected the facility. Sam would need to get past all of them and reach the extraction chambers where the dragons were being held. But she had advantages that the security planners hadn't considered. Prism could interface with any electronic system, potentially turning the station's own defenses against its guards. And Sam's years of repair work had taught her that every system had backdoors and maintenance protocols that could be exploited by someone who understood how they really worked. Most importantly, they weren't planning a conventional assault. They were going to do something that the corporations would never expect. They were going to ask the imprisoned dragons for help. Prism had explained that its people could communicate through quantum resonance across vast distances. Once they got close enough to the station, Prism could contact the captives and coordinate their resistance from within. On the night before they planned to launch, Sam sat in her garage looking at the strange ship they had built together. It represented everything she had learned about fixing broken things and making them work again. But this time, instead of repairing a machine, she was trying to repair an injustice. Prism perched beside her, its scales glowing softly in the dim light. The dragon had grown stronger during their weeks together, its crystalline body more vibrant and its movements more confident. Sam realized that she had been healing too, discovering abilities and courage she never knew she possessed. Tomorrow they would find out if a mechanic and a dragon could accomplish the impossible. Looking at her grease-stained hands and the incredible ship they had built, Sam thought they just might have a chance. The orbital station hung in space like a metallic spider, its arms reaching out to grasp the streams of quantum energy flowing from its core. Sam guided their hybrid ship through the debris field surrounding the facility, using the wreckage of old mining vessels as cover. The stealth systems that Prism had integrated into their hull made them nearly invisible, but Sam still felt exposed as they approached their target. "Remember the plan," Sam whispered to Prism, who was connected to the ship's navigation systems through crystalline tendrils that had grown from its claws. "Get us to the maintenance airlock on the lower section. Avoid the main sensor arrays." Prism's response came through the ship's communication system, its thoughts translated into words that appeared on Sam's screen. The pain is very strong here. My people are suffering greatly. We must hurry. Sam could feel it too. A wrongness in the quantum fields around the station that made her teeth ache and her vision blur. The dragons were being tortured on an industrial scale, their life force harvested to power systems across the sector. The waste heat from the extraction process made the station's hull glow with unnatural colors. They docked at a service port that Prism had identified in the corporate schematics. The airlock was designed for automated cargo drones, not for people, but Sam had modified her suit to interface with the station's systems. As they cycled through the lock, Prism extended its abilities into the station's computer network, carefully avoiding the main security protocols. The maintenance corridor beyond the airlock was narrow and poorly lit, designed for machines rather than people. Sam moved carefully, her magnetic boots keeping her anchored to the metal deck in the low gravity. Prism rode on her shoulder, its claws gripping her suit as it worked to map the station's internal systems. Security patrol coming. Prism's warning appeared on Sam's helmet display. Hide. They pressed into an alcove filled with spare parts and waited as two guards floated past, their conversation echoing in the corridor. Extraction rates are up 30% this week, one guard said. Corporate wants even more power for that big contract. Poor things won't last much longer at this rate, the other replied. We're burning through them faster than we can acquire new ones. Sam felt sick listening to them talk about the dragons like they were disposable equipment. After the guards passed, she and Prism continued deeper into the station, following maintenance shafts and service corridors toward the extraction chambers. The first chamber they reached made Sam stop and stare in horror. Through a reinforced window, she could see dozens of dragons suspended in crystal matrices, their bodies connected to massive machines by cables and tubes. The creatures were barely conscious, their natural glow reduced to faint flickers. Some were no bigger than Prism, children stolen from their families and enslaved. Can you contact them? Sam asked. Prism placed its claws against the wall and began to glow with concentrated quantum energy. The response was immediate. Throughout the chamber, the captive dragons began to stir, their scales brightening as they felt their rescued siblings' presence. One by one, they turned their heads toward the wall where Sam and Prism were hidden. Messages flowed between the dragons through quantum resonance, too fast and complex for Sam to follow. But she could sense the emotional content: joy at contact with the outside world, desperate hope for rescue, and growing determination to fight back against their captors. They're ready, appeared on Sam's display, but the extraction systems have safety locks. If the dragons resist too strongly, the machines will kill them to prevent an overload. Sam studied the chamber's layout through the window. The quantum extraction equipment was sophisticated, but she could see its weaknesses. Like all complex systems, it depended on precise calibration and careful monitoring. If she could disrupt the control mechanisms at just the right moment, the safety locks would disengage and the dragons could break free without triggering the lethal failsafes. I need to get inside that chamber, she told Prism. Can you override the security locks? Yes, but guards will respond quickly once the alarms sound. We will have very little time. Sam checked her equipment one more time. She had brought shaped charges designed for cutting through hull plating, electromagnetic pulse grenades that could disable electronic systems, and her trusty plasma cutter for precision work. Everything she needed to break a lot of expensive equipment very quickly. Do it. The chamber's security door hissed open and alarms immediately began wailing throughout the station. Sam rushed inside, making straight for the central control console while Prism flew overhead, its quantum abilities reaching out to the captive dragons. The extraction machines were even more horrifying up close. Each dragon was held in a crystalline cage that amplified their natural quantum abilities while draining their life force. The machines fed on their consciousness itself, converting their thoughts and dreams into raw computational power. Sam began her work with ruthless efficiency, her plasma cutter slicing through control cables while her pulse grenades disabled backup systems. Every piece of equipment she destroyed weakened the hold the machines had on their victims. Behind her, she could hear the dragons beginning to stir more actively as the extraction fields fluctuated. Guards approaching the chamber, Prism warned. 30 seconds. Sam worked faster, targeting the main quantum resonance generators that kept the extraction field stable. As each generator failed, more dragons began to break free from their crystal prisons, their natural abilities no longer suppressed by the machines. The chamber door exploded inward as corporate security forces blasted their way inside. Sam dove for cover behind a bank of destroyed equipment as energy bolts filled the air around her. But the guards had made a critical mistake. They had entered a chamber full of very angry dragons who were no longer helpless. The freed dragons rose into the air, their combined quantum abilities creating a field of distorted space-time that deflected the guards' weapons. Energy bolts curved impossibly through the air, striking walls and equipment instead of their targets. The dragons began to sing, their voices creating harmonics that resonated through the station's hull. More chambers throughout the station began to experience failures as the singing dragons coordinated their resistance. Extraction machines overloaded and shut down, freeing more captives who added their voices to the growing chorus. The quantum resonance built and built until the entire station shook with sympathetic vibrations. The main quantum core is destabilizing, Prism reported, its scales blazing with excitement. If it overloads, it will destroy the station and disable faster-than-light communication across this entire sector. Sam realized she had a choice to make. She could try to evacuate just the dragons in this chamber and escape with a small number of rescued prisoners, or she could let the dragons destroy the entire facility, freeing all their people but crippling the colony's advanced technology in the process. She thought about Director Walsh and his threats, about the acid rain falling on Haven's Edge, about the casual way the guards had discussed the dragon's suffering. Then she thought about the 347 thinking, feeling beings who had been tortured to power corporate profits. Let it burn, she said. The dragon's song reached a crescendo that shattered windows throughout the station. Emergency lights flickered and died as power systems failed one by one. In the distance, Sam could hear the rumble of the main quantum core beginning to tear itself apart. We need to leave now, Prism urged. Sam gathered as many of the freed dragons as she could carry, the small creatures clinging to her suit as they fled through corridors filled with smoke and sparks. Behind them, the extraction chambers erupted in brilliant flashes of light as decades of stolen quantum energy was released all at once. Their ship was exactly where they had left it, its stealth system still active. Sam sealed the rescued dragons into the cargo bay and fired the engines just as the station's quantum core reached critical overload. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system, a new star that burned for exactly 13 seconds before fading into cooling debris. As they flew back toward Haven's Edge, Sam watched the rescued dragons through the cargo bay cameras. They huddled together, their scales dim with exhaustion, but their eyes were bright with freedom. Prism moved among them, touching each one gently, sharing news of their rescue and the destruction of their prison. How many did we save? Sam asked. The answer appeared on her screen. All of them. Every dragon on that station is free. Sam felt tears in her eyes as she realized what they had accomplished. Against all odds, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a dragon who believed in her had destroyed a corporate facility and liberated an entire enslaved population. But their work wasn't finished yet. The freed dragons needed medical care, food, and shelter. The colony would demand answers about the loss of their quantum processing power. And somewhere in the galaxy, corporate executives would be planning their revenge. Sam looked at her hands on the ship's controls, the same hands that had reached out to help a crying dragon in the acid rain. Those hands had just changed the course of history. 6 months after the destruction of the orbital station, Sam's garage had become the most unusual workshop in known space. Dragons of all sizes perched on equipment, their crystalline scales casting rainbow patterns across the walls as they worked alongside human mechanics to build technologies that neither species could have, created alone. The immediate aftermath of the rescue had been chaotic. The colonial government had demanded explanations, corporate security had launched investigations, and the loss of quantum processing power had crippled advanced systems throughout the sector. But the dragons themselves had provided the solution. Led by Prism, who had become something like an ambassador for its people, the dragons had offered humanity a choice. They could rebuild the old system of slavery and exploitation, or they could work together to create something entirely new. The dragons were willing to share their quantum abilities freely, but only with humans who demonstrated the same courage and compassion that Sam had shown. The response had been mixed. Some colonial officials and corporate executives had demanded that the dragons be recaptured and forced back into service, but word of the rescue had spread throughout human space, carried by the very communication networks that the dragons had powered. Public opinion had turned strongly against the corporations, and several governments had banned the use of enslaved sentience in quantum processing. Sam had found herself at the center of a revolution she never intended to start. Her small garage became a meeting place for humans and dragons who wanted to explore the possibilities of true cooperation. Engineers came from across the sector to learn how to work with the dragons' quantum abilities, while the dragons learned about human creativity and determination. The first breakthrough had come when a young dragon named Crystal had partnered with Dr. Lisa Park, a quantum physicist from the university. Together, they had developed a new type of faster-than-light communicator that used voluntary quantum resonance instead of forced extraction. The dragons would sing information across space, their natural abilities amplified but not exploited by human technology. Other partnerships had followed. Dragons working with human artists created sculptures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dragon-human engineering teams built ships that could phase through solid matter, or exist in several locations at once. Medical researchers working with dragon healers developed treatments that operated on the quantum level, healing diseases that had been considered incurable. But the most important development was less tangible. The dragons had brought something to humanity that Sam was only beginning to understand, a different way of thinking about technology and progress. Where humans tended to build machines that dominated their environment, the dragons created technologies that worked in harmony with natural forces. Sam watched from her workbench as Prism demonstrated this philosophy to a group of visiting engineers. The dragon placed its claws on a broken quantum drive that the humans had declared beyond repair. Instead of forcing the components to work, Prism sang to them, encouraging the damaged crystals to remember their proper configuration. The drive hummed to life, not just repaired but improved. Its efficiency increased by factors the engineers couldn't explain. The secret, Prism explained through the translation device they had built together, is not to impose your will on matter, but to listen to what it wants to become. It was a lesson that applied to more than just technology. The partnership between humans and dragons had flourished precisely because it was based on mutual respect, rather than domination. The dragons offered their abilities freely, because they knew they were valued as individuals, not exploited as resources. Not everyone had embraced the new paradigm. The Quantum Mining Consortium had filed lawsuits claiming that the dragons were their property and demanding compensation for their stolen assets. Several corporate fleets had been spotted on the edges of the system, possibly planning an attack to recapture the freed dragons. But the dragons were no longer helpless prisoners. Working with human engineers, they had built defensive systems that made Haven's Edge one of the most protected worlds in the sector. Ships that approached with hostile intent found themselves lost in quantum mazes that could stretch a few seconds of flight time into hours of confused wandering. More importantly, the dragons had begun teaching their quantum abilities to willing humans. The process was difficult and dangerous, requiring a fundamental shift in how the human brain processed reality. But a few individuals had shown remarkable aptitude, becoming the first human quantum engineers. Sam had been among the early volunteers for the training, though her progress had been slower than some of the university researchers. Her mechanical background actually worked against her at first, since she was used to thinking in terms of nuts and bolts rather than quantum probabilities. But Prism had been patient with her, guiding her through meditation exercises that gradually opened her mind to new possibilities. The breakthrough had come when Sam was working on a particularly stubborn fusion regulator. Instead of trying to force the components into alignment, she had followed Prism's advice and listened to what the machine wanted to tell her. Suddenly, she could sense the quantum flows within the device, feel where the energy was being blocked or misdirected. Her hands had begun to glow with the same soft light that emanated from the dragons. When she touched the regulator, its components shifted into perfect harmony without any physical adjustment. Sam had become the first human to successfully perform quantum healing on a machine. The ability had grown stronger with practice. Sam could now repair almost any device by singing to it the way the dragons did, encouraging its components to remember their ideal state. Her reputation as a miracle worker had spread throughout the sector, but she still preferred working in her garage with Prism and the small community of humans and dragons who had become her extended family. The rain outside had been clean for months now, falling in gentle drops that nourished the colony's gardens instead of burning them with acid. The extraction facility was gone, replaced by a network of voluntary partners who sang energy across space for the joy of creation rather than the pain of slavery. Children from the colony often visited the garage now, their eyes wide with wonder as they watched dragons and humans working together. Sam had started teaching basic mechanics to anyone who was interested, while the dragons shared stories of their homeworld and its crystal cities that grew like living things. One little girl had asked Sam why she had decided to help Prism that night in the acid rain, when it would have been safer to just close her door and pretend she hadn't heard anything. Sam had looked at her grease-stained hands, the same hands that had reached out to a crying dragon and changed the course of history. Because someone needed help, she had said simply. And these hands know how to fix things that are broken. The girl had nodded solemnly as if this explanation made perfect sense. Later, Sam had seen her in the garage trying to repair a broken toy, her small hands moving with careful determination as she whispered encouragement to the damaged components. As the sun set over Haven's Edge, Sam stood in the doorway of her garage and watched dragons playing in the clean puddles left by the afternoon rain. Their scales cast brilliant patterns of light across the water, and their joyful singing filled the evening air. Prism perched on her shoulder, its presence a warm comfort against the cooling night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Corporate fleets might attack, new technologies would need to be developed, and the fragile alliance between humans and dragons would require constant nurturing. But tonight, Sam was content to watch the children of two worlds play together under stars that had witnessed the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history, a partnership between species, based on compassion rather than conquest, built by grease-stained hands that knew how to fix things that everyone else said were broken beyond repair.